This video is about dashes and hyphens. It corresponds to section 7.12.7 of the Applied Analog Electronics textbook. The problem with dashes and hyphens in English is that there are several different glyphs, different symbols, that have different uses, and most people are not taught much about them. What are these different glyphs? Well, the four basic ones are: the shortest is the hyphen. The next longer one, which is written in LaTeX with two hyphens, is an Mdash. And a still longer one, written in LaTeX with three hyphens, is an Mdash. And finally, written again with a single hyphen, is the minus sign. But the minus sign in LaTeX only comes up when you're in math mode. Now, if you're on Mac operating system, you can actually get the hyphen N-dash and M-dash, which are Unicode characters, directly by typing hyphen, option hyphen, and shift option hyphen. And that's quite convenient when you're working in a system other than LaTeX and need to get at the characters themselves. I don't know of an easy way to do it in either Linux or Windows. I know some kind of awkward roundabout ways to get them, but I don't know anything that's as easy as what it is in the MacOS, or for that matter, as easy as it is in LaTeX. All right, so when do you use these different things, and what do they mean? The minus sign is probably the most straightforward one. It is the mathematical symbol for negation or subtraction. And basically, if you just use the minus sign in math mode or display math mode, LaTeX will do the right thing for you. It'll pick the right character, it'll do the right spacing for it, and you just don't have to think about it. So, minus sign is easy. The M-dash, the largest of these things, is for sentence level stuff. So, M-dash is sentence level. And sentence level means that you're combining separate thoughts and you're showing a sudden break between one thought and another. It's used for parenthetical sorts of expressions, for sudden shifts in thought. And if you're using a lot of them in your writing, you probably need to rewrite what you're doing, because those sudden shifts in thought can be very confusing to the reader. Not to say you never use them. They are indeed quite useful at times, but there shouldn't be a lot of them in technical writing. The M-dash is used for ranges. And that means things like 3 to 10. And that's an N-dash in there, so in LaTeX you would type it as 3 hyphen 10. When you're using ranges, the range is a whole object by itself. And it really should be read as something like from 3 to 10. And because it's got this from and to already in the range, you can't use the dash and a preposition. So if you tried to write from 3-10, it'd be wrong, because this would be from 3 to 10. And similarly, you can't say between 3-10, because that would be between from 3 to 10. So those you can't do. If you want to use the preposition from, then use to, not a dash. If you want to use the preposition between, then use and, not a dash. Incidentally, all these dashes have no spaces around them. N-dash, M-dash, hyphen, no spaces around them. There are times when you will see people suggested that when they type things to put spaces around hyphens to indicate that they're dashes. No, that's old 1950s, 1960s style TypeScript conventions when they were basically treated as instructions to a typographer who knew what they were doing. When you're having to do the typography yourself, you have to know what you're doing, and that means no spaces around your hyphens. or your n dashes, or your m dashes. None of these take spaces. When you're in math mode, spaces don't matter. The math mode takes care of all the spacing for you. Okay, so we've talked about minus signs, m dashes, and n dashes. They're all fairly straightforward. Hyphens have got the most uses, and so they're the most complicated. Hyphens get used for lots of different things. You get prefix and suffix. That is to say, some prefixes and some suffixes get attached with hyphens, some get attached without hyphens. We get compound nouns. And again, some compound nouns have hyphens, some don't. We get a noun phrase. If you use a noun phrase as a modifier, use a noun phrase as a modifier, that whole noun phrase gets connected together with hyphens. And finally, there's line breaks. When you get to the end of a line and the word doesn't all fit, sometimes you'll see the word broken in the middle between syllables with a hyphen and the rest of the word put on the next line. Now, one of the things that you should be aware of in LaTeX is that the line breaks are done automatically for you. You do not ever want to put in deliberate hyphens to make a line break, because then when you edit things and move things around, that hyphen appears in the middle of your line somewhere, and you end up with half a word hyphen space and the other half of the word, and it just looks terrible. Let LaTeX do the hyphenation for you on the line breaks. Now, every once in a while, LaTeX will get a line break hyphenation wrong, or won't see a hyphenation because the word is a foreign word or doesn't happen to match its hyphenation rules in dictionaries. In those cases, there are ways to tell LaTeX how to hyphenate the word, how to put in discretionary hyphens. You can look those things up on the web if you really run into a problem where LaTeX is having a lot of trouble with hyphenation. But for the most part, don't touch the hyphenation at line breaks. Just let LaTeX do that for you. Okay, so what about these other things? Noun phrases as modifiers. That one's pretty straightforward. Take a noun phrase like amino acid. That's a nice noun phrase. And you want to talk about amino acid synthesis. Well, amino acid is not hyphenated, but if you want to write amino acid synthesis, the amino acid has to be hyphenated because it's a noun phrase modifying the head noun synthesis. And if you wanted to say the amino acid synthesis pathway, where pathway is now the head noun, and amino acid synthesis modifies it, then you have to hyphenate the whole thing, amino acid synthesis pathway. And pathway, incidentally, is a compound noun that doesn't have a hyphen. So this rule causes some people problems in this class because we use op-amp both as a noun phrase and sometimes as a modifier. When op-amp is modifying something else, it gets hyphenated. When the amp there is the head noun by itself, it doesn't get hyphenated. And so be aware of how you're using something, because that affects the hyphenation. Now for compound nouns, things get a little more complicated because English goes through sort of evolution with compound nouns. It's something that starts out as two nouns, then becomes a hyphenated noun, and then the hyphenated noun sometimes becomes an unhyphenated one. And you have to know sort of where in evolution, in this process of evolution, a compound noun is. And I mean, if you ask somebody, these things change very rapidly. 20, 30 years and it's different. So you ask somebody my age and you may get a different answer than if you ask somebody who's 20 or 30 years younger. So I found a very useful tool for figuring out where compound nouns are in their evolution. And that tool is books.google.com ngrams. What I've done here is I have searched for the compound word bandpass. which we use for things like bandpass filters. And you'll see several different possible uses. You'll see bandpass, you'll see band-pass, and you'll see bandpass is a single word. Which one's correct? Well, basically, they're all common enough to be considered correct. The most common and the most popular right now is bandpass as a single word. But bandpass hyphenated is still fairly common. And bandpass as two words even is not that unusual. What did I pick in the book? Well, I was tempted, because I like bandpass as a single word, to use that throughout, but I ended up choosing the hyphenated form because we have a couple other words that we use for filters, like low-pass filters and high-pass filters, and when I did the same sort of n-gram search for that, those are still hyphenated. And so because bandpass, low-pass, and high-pass are all being used in the same way, I decided to keep them visually parallel as well as semantically parallel, so I hyphenate all through. And incidentally, the low-pass filter and high-pass filter can be thought of as just simple instances of not a compound noun here, but a noun phrase being used as a modifier. Low pass is a noun phrase, and low pass modifying filter becomes low pass hyphenated and then filter. So to keep that parallelism, I've chose bandpass as a hyphenated word rather than as a single word. You can use whichever style you like as long as you're consistent. And I would recommend either the hyphenated or the single word unhyphenated for bandpass. Let's take a look at a different thing where we have a prefix and a word. I'll pick one that we don't actually use much in this course, but which you might have seen in other courses, and that's pseudocode, where you can attach the prefix with a hyphen or attach the prefix without a hyphen. And which one's more popular? Well, let's talk before I do that. Well, we can see the single word pseudocode is 3 or 4 times more popular than the hyphenated one. So I would go with the unhyphenated one here, but this ratio is still small enough that either one's acceptable. There is another thing that you will sometimes see where people who do not realize that pseudo is a prefix and try to treat it as a separate word. You'll sometimes see people doing that, and you can see that's a good deal less common. And you can also see that it came in a good deal later. I do not like this pop-up. In the early days, it was pseudocode as a hyphenated word, because pseudo and code don't really fit together all that well, being a combination of Greek and Latin. Pseudocode then became a single word and became very popular as a single word, and then some people made a back formation where they thought pseudo was a word by itself rather than a prefix. And that came in much later than either of the other two. So I would say that the pseudocode as 2 words here is wrong. Pseudocode hyphenated is okay. Pseudocode as a single word is probably the best choice. If you check other words, you'll find that some combinations are very much one way or the other. If you look at recycling with the hyphen and without the hyphen, it's almost never used with a hyphen. And so that would be considered wrong. Small number of instances where it occurs are just mistakes. Okay, so what have we got summarizing? We've got 4 different symbols. The hyphen, which is used for some prefixes and suffixes, often ones where if you didn't use a hyphen, you would end up with 2 vowels together or something and have it misinterpreted. So prefixes and suffixes occasionally use hyphens. Compound nouns sometimes use hyphens, sometimes not, sometimes you use separate words, and your best bet is just to look for what's the most common usage. Noun phrases as modifiers, the entire noun phrase gets hyphenated. Hyphens is line breaks. Don't do those manually. Let the program do those for you and don't touch them. And if you're copying from somewhere else, which you should never be doing, watch out, because a lot of times you copy in hyphens that are not really there in the underlying words, and then they get put in weird stuff. So if you're doing a quoted quotation, make sure that any hyphens that were added by line breaks get removed from the quotation before you use the quote. Mdash is used for ranges, and it includes both the from and the to in the range, so don't stick from in front of it. Mdashes are used for sentence level punctuation to separate big chunks of sentences. Use them sparingly. And if you find yourself using them a lot, start looking at separating your sentences with periods or using conjunctions. And finally, minus signs are very straightforward because you use them only in math mode, and math mode just does the right thing with them. Have fun with your dashes and hyphens.